Grade 11, choice 2, part 1. Sorry, that's wrong. This is grade 11, choice 1, part 1. I'll change this. Back, stranger. Welcome back, other stranger. Back up to 4. Numbers have doubled. Sit, guys. Pardon? It was a private lesson.
I was on the Zoom.
Okay. Okay, so we're going. All right, so this is as far as we got last time. We were talking about the different sides of the brain and what they do. Okay, so left-hand brain functions, and please don't learn this. This is analytical thought, logic, language, reasoning, science and maths, written, number skills, and this is a spelling error, it wasn't even mine. Okay, right-hand control. So I finished off yesterday by talking about the fact that, yep.
I just wanted to ask, is it recording?
Yes, both of them are. Thank you. I had to learn how to do it myself because you bunt.
I'm sorry. I was just muted.
Yeah, and these two.
We have faulty with that technology.
Okay, so what I was saying yesterday when we finished off was that the right side of the brain controls the left side of the body, and the left side of the brain controls the right side of the body. And don't obsess about that. So if, for example, a person has a stroke on the left side of their brain, then the right side of the body is paralyzed. It's almost like a line is drawn down the middle of their body. The right side of the body is paralyzed and vice versa. Okay, all right, going. Okay, let's talk about grey and white matter, and this is important for you to understand, so you better listen. So it goes. The brain and the spinal cord contain two different colours of nerve tissue, or two different regions always, and those are referred to as the grey matter and the white matter. So if a section is taken through the brain, I found the other half of the cerebellum was there. So if a section is taken through the brain, so if I took this and I cut a section down through it, then what you would see is that the outer part of the brain, so there's an outer layer and it's got the fissures and whatever, the outer region of the brain is grey matter. And the inner region of the brain is white matter. Okay, now, just listen, don't write, understand what I'm saying to you. It's all in the way that the neurons lie. So if you look at a neuron, and remember that the brain and spinal cord are made of multipolar neurons. And remember that multipolar neurons have got short dendrites, then a cell body, and then an axon. And remember that the axon is surrounded by Schwann cells. And remember that the Schwann cells have got the myelin sheath, which is layers and layers and layers of cell membrane. And you know that cell membrane is made of phospholipid and protein. So you know that the myelin sheath myelin, that way, this way, sorry, I can't spell, the best of times I can't spell. And so the myelin sheath is very, very fatty. Now if you take a chop out of the deep freeze and you put it down, how do you know what's the fatty part? What color is it? White. Excellent. So this is white. Okay, whereas the cell body's got lots of granules in it, and therefore it is grey. And so, if you look at the arrangement of the neurons in the brain, it's basically the cell bodies are concentrated towards the outside and the axons face down towards the inside. So this is grey and that is white. Does that make sense? Okay, so the cell bodies are grey in colour because they've got granules in them. The axons with the myelin sheath, it's not the axon so much as the myelin sheath is fatty, and so it's white in appearance. And so because all the things are arranged where the cell bodies are concentrated towards the outside and the axons like face down towards the inside part is white and the outside part is grey. Right, who reads Sherlock Holmes? Okay, I don't suppose I should mention the word read for you children. Who watches Sherlock Holmes on TV? I don't know, is there a Sherlock Holmes program? No, not, because all of you are making your eyes go that way, so you're going, please God, don't let her pick on me. Who was Sherlock Holmes' sidekick?
Harrison? Someone like that. Wilson or something.
Watson.
Watson, that's it.
Watson. Well done. Well done. You're obviously more literate than these illiterate girls. So, yeah, because he used to say, elementary, my dear Watson. Anyway, so the story goes. He always used to say to Watson, use your grey matter. And what he was saying was use the outside part of the brain. So this outside part of the brain is the cortex of the brain, where we had cortex before. Oh, do we not have a quiz next week and you've got to know this word? Where have you had a cortex before? Excellent. Where have you had a cortex last year? Chloe's going, if I don't make eye contact with her, she doesn't know I'm here. Chloe, there are 4 kids in this class, I know you're here. Physically, if not mentally. Where did you have a cortex last year?
I want to say the heart.
So the short answer to that is no. So you have, I'm fine, you want to say it, you can say it, but it's wrong. Stems and roots. No, cross-sections of stems, cross-section of the root.
Oh, you got a cortex? I don't remember that.
Yeah.
Oh, I remember that.
So, the outer layer, cortex, and the inner layer is the medulla.
Oh.
Okay, and in the root as well, cortex, medulla. So it's always cortex towards the outside, medulla towards the inside. Okay, right, you happy? So it's just the same thing. And don't obsess about the fact that it was, I'm not allowed to say don't obsess, the other class mocked me. I'm not going to say it anymore. Just learn it, I don't care. Okay, right. So white matter is composed of fatty myelin sheaths surrounding the axons and neurons, and that makes it appear white and shiny. So this inside part of the brain is white and shiny. And I showed you the corpus callosum yesterday. Very white, very hard, very shiny. Okay. Grey matter contains no fatty myelin sheaths, consists of the cell bodies of neurons, and also contains what are known as interneurons, which lie in different directions, and also stuff called glial cells, but don't obsess about that. And they're involved in coordination and analysis of nerve impulses. So in the brain, the white matter is on the inside and the grey matter is on the outside, but you're going to see when we deal with the spinal cord, it's the other way around. But it'll make sense when we get there. Okay, happy? Right. So this is the spinal cord. Ignore it. We're not dealing with that yet. But this is a section through the brain. And what you can see very clearly is the grey matter. You're late. Hi.
Hi.
Okay. We're missing you.
Oh, I can't see you.
Why?
I don't know.
Okay. All right. As long as you can hear me, my puppet.
I can hear you.
But then you can't see the screen. Why can't
I
you?
can't see the screen.
Can you?
I just couldn't see you.
Oh, I'm here. I was on
Yeah,
the side. Hi. Okay. So grey matter on the outside and white matter. And it's not white, I have to be quite honest. It's not like sunlight white. Okay. Sort of, it is pale grey. Okay. All right. Are we happy with that? Yeah. This is quite a nice thing to watch. Okay. 100-hour MRI scan of the brain. It shows over 100 hours, very thin sections taken through the brain. So if you want to watch it, you can watch it. It doesn't last 100 hours. You can go.
Yeah, I was back.
Yeah, nobody in life's got 100 hours. Okay, all right, so we go. The cerebrum is the largest part of the brain, and remember it's part of the forebrain, okay? And it's approximately 75% of the total volume of the brain. And then remember I said to you yesterday that the cerebrum is, like a jigsaw puzzle. There we go. Okay. I said to you that it's clearly divided. It's not just divided for the purposes of this model, but it is very clearly divided by a very deep longitudinal fissure. Okay, so there's a very deep groove there that is divided into a left and a right half, and it is separated all the way to this band. Sorry, Cammy. to this band of white tissue here, which is known as the corpus callosum, so that you would be able to take something and put it down through the center of the brain, and it would go as far as that little band of white tissue there, the corpus callosum. Okay, everyone happy with that? Okay, all right. So that's that divides it into two what are called cerebral hemispheres, like the two hemispheres of the Earth. Okay, the two hemispheres are partly connected to each other by a mass of white fibers. So this is axons, and this is because there are neurons lying in that direction, across like that. And that white band of white fibers, this little shape like that, sickle shape, is called the corpus callosum, and that allows communication between the two cerebral hemispheres. So the two cerebral hemispheres really function independently of each other, except where the nerve fibers cross over at the corpus callosum. Okay, all right. Okay. Then yesterday I spoke about the fact that within each hemisphere there's a little cavity called a lateral ventricle, or ventricle 1 and 2. And then in the middle there was ventricle 3. No, that's the fourth. Ventricle 3. And fourth ventricle was down at the bottom here, and it connects to the central canal, which goes down through the spinal cord. And guys, please, you're looking at this and going, I need to know all this stuff. I will tell you when it's important detail. And for the rest of it, you actually don't have to worry so much about it. You need an understanding of it, but really you are writing down and trying to memorize a lot more detail than I need you to know. So I'm just giving you a general background picture, and then I will tell you where it's important stuff. Okay, all right. Have you not got another layer somewhere?
Me?
Yes.
I'm fine, Mom.
Are you?
How are you fine? I'm not even fine.
Yeah, I know. I look at you and I don't feel fine.
I've got 3 layers on, but I'm generally fine.
Okay.
When I was outside.
Okay, all right. Okay, and then the surface of the cortex, as I showed you here and as I showed you on the model, is very, very folded, and those folds form what are called fissures. Okay, so a fissure is this little crevice that is here and here and here and here. And apparently lots of fissures is a sign of intelligence and evolutionary development. As you go up in terms of evolution, more and more fissures developed. And it's possible to see evidence of that when going back through evolution and looking at evidence in the hominid evolution, etc., that way further back in evolution of man, there were fewer fissures. Okay. All right, so I've already spoken about that. I've said to you that the cerebral cortex is grey matter, and the internal part of the brain consists of white matter. Okay, so now this is a section of the brain where it's not the typical, you see it that way. This particular section that they're showing you here is a section which is taken that way. So it's also a longitudinal section, but it's taken down through that way instead of through that way. Okay, all right, does that make sense? And so that's why you can see, look, there's ventricle, white matter, corpus callosum, connecting the two, and then grey matter on the outside. And then this is that deep longitudinal fissure that divides the left and the right cerebral hemisphere. Okay, I want a convincing nod there. Okay, you sure? Rest of you, sure. Okay, all right. So there's that longitudinal fissure. It's coloured in red here just to show you. And please don't write about this. Okay, There's also another fissure here and a fissure there, which is deeper than the rest of them. Please don't learn those ones, but I'm going to show you just now that the different regions are in front of this or behind this or below this or whatever. So that's why I'm pointing them out to you now. Okay. So the cerebrum it's divided into what are called lobes, but they're not clearly separated from each other. Okay, so it's not, you can absolutely clearly say this is where one lobe ends and another lobe starts, really. So if you look at this, there's the person's eye. Now this has been made bigger than this person's, with that size eye, would have a brain. But what's important is they have the same names as the bones of the cranium underneath which they lie. Do you remember the names of the bones of the cranium from last year? No. There I've got an honest child. No, no. You're a bunch of useless nanas. Okay. All right. What does that mean? Didn't learn them? Didn't hear them? Didn't whatever? Okay. So let's have a quick look at the human skull and we'll talk about the bones of the cranium.
Ma'am, what happens when you get a concussion?
When I get a concussion, what are you planning on doing? Mugging me?
No, like when anyone gets a concussion.
Okay, so what actually happens is the brain is inside the cranium, but if an injury happens on this side, the brain actually moves within the cranium. It can move a little bit, and it gets damage on the other side because it hits against the cranium on that side, and it gets damaged. It's almost like a bruise. That's what I've been told. That's what our lecturer at varsity told us happens. If they've changed it since then, nobody's told me. Okay, right, so good. Okay, so if you look on the skull, okay, then what you can see is the joints between the bones of the skull, of the cranium. And they're very specific zigzag joints, they're called sutures. And if you look here, there's a suture there, and there's a suture here. This bone is called the frontal bone. Okay? If you look at the side, just lost parts there. Okay. Can you see there's a suture here? Okay, there's a little suture there. So this part, from that central suture there down to there, is called the parietal. So there's parietal and parietal. And then this part underneath that suture is the temporal, that temple. Okay, and then if you look at the back, you'll see that the central suture comes along there, and then it divides down there, and there's one bone at the back here, and this is called the occipital. So occipital, one bone. Parietal, two bones. Temporal, two bones. Frontal, one bone. Okay, so now those are the names of the bones of the cranium. The lobes of the brain that lie underneath those bones have got the same names. Okay, so if you look here, in red is the frontal lobe. Okay, then there's the parietal, the occipital at the back, and the temporal at the sides. Okay, frontal, parietal, occipital, temporal. Right, okay with that. Okay, so each of these parts has got different functions. And I spoke a little bit about this yesterday. I think it was this class. I said, how do they know the functions of the different regions of the brain? They would look at somebody who had an injury to a part and then see what they were unable to do. So let's say, for example, a person was injured and the temporal lobe didn't work. Then what they would do is look at what can't that person do. That means that the function of the temporal lobe is X, Y, and Z. So the frontal lobe is terribly, terribly, terribly important. It's involved in reasoning, motor control, that means control of movements. So that's where movements are initiated. So if I want to go in that direction, then it's my frontal lobe that says pick up your left foot, pick up your right foot, move, 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 move. Okay? Emotion, language. It's involved in planning and coordinating movement, and it is responsible for higher level cognitive functioning. That means thinking functioning. It's the area which is essential for language production. So really that's in terms of thinking, judgment, all of those higher order processes go on in the frontal lobe. And next year, when you deal with human evolution, what you're going to see is the development in the Homo species. Do you know what I'm talking about? So the species which came before humans were the Australopithecines, and then they evolved into the different homos until you get to Homo sapiens. And if you look at the evolution of all those individuals, you will see that the skull actually develops to have a bigger and bigger and better developed frontal lobe. So this part became bigger and bigger and bigger. In the homos before Homo sapiens, the frontal lobe was very slanted backwards like that. And therefore there wasn't a very big frontal lobe, and that is evidence that those individuals didn't have as deep a cognitive ability. They weren't able to think as easily, they weren't able to reason as well. Their judgment wasn't as good, etc., etc. And so humans are the ones that have got the biggest frontal lobe, so they have the highest cognitive ability. Does that make sense, guys? You sure? Remember this next year when you deal with evolution. Okay. Parietal lobe, which remember is this one. Okay. It's the area concerned with the sensations of touch, warmth, and cold. So it's a sensory area. Okay. Temporal lobe, the area of hearing, smelling, and tasting. So remember that the temporal lobe is down here. Okay. And